Okay, we can start now.
Perfect. We're live. Welcome, everyone, to the Hunt-A-Thon workshop series. We're back with yet another workshop for you with Drew from ArchID. I know we met previously as well, which was also to talk about the ArchID bounties. But as we mentioned, there are two tracks in the bounty. First is the Web3 DNS, and second is the Web3 identity. But happy to have Drew back with us today. He's going to talk more about the bounty and going to guide you through it, present all his content that he has for you. So, yeah, without taking a lot of your time, Drew, over to you.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming today. In the previous workshop, which was on Tuesday, we were talking about the Web3 identity track. Today, we're going to talk about the other track, which is the Web3 DNS track. So we're going to talk about the ArchID registry contract more. And in the previous workshop, we were talking about the NFT contract principally, which is where the user profile information is stored for different ArchID identities. So just show you the agenda. We're currently in the introduction slide. We will talk a little bit about judging and prizes. We'll talk a little bit about routing in the name service contract. And we'll talk a little bit about utility services that you can build on top of the registry. And then just a little bit about how you can request help or support from us. And then at the end of the session, we'll open up for a Q&A, question and answer period. So before going much further, I know that I did go over this particular stuff in the previous workshop, but helpful just to review again for anyone who wasn't there. So these are some helper links. If don't stress if you don't want to copy these down right now as you're watching. You'll get access to this slide later and all the links will be there. But just a couple things to go over. So the first link is the front end for ArchID. This is where you'll go to register domains. For the most part, unless you're providing that functionality within your own project, which of course you can do from your own front end. Decentralized life, love it. Yeah, the contracts are there for anyone to use. We do have a docs website as well. All of our code is open source. You will find it at github.com/archid-protocol. And another helpful thing to know is that you can perform a search. If you're approaching this from a Rust development perspective, which I imagine many people are, you can search for us on crates.io and import our packages directly into your project. Just a quick example of how that would work. If you go to crates.io, as you see at the top of the screen here, maybe it's a little bit small, but if you search on crates.io for ArchID, you're going to find all the packages that we have that can easily be imported into your project. And if you open them up, you'll see all the different versions. Most of them are pretty similar to version 1. The latest versions are mostly updates to the documentation, which is embedded in those repositories. As we are talking about the registry contract today, I'm just going to open up this one for a second. I just want to draw your attention here to, there is some basic information here just on the landing page. But we are also, as I mentioned, we do have our documentation website, docs.archid.app. Make this a little bigger for you. There's information here for contract developers and dApp developers. So all of the JavaScript stuff that you'll need for including our contract entry points in your website front ends. We also do have some very basic documentation for contract developers. Probably, if you're approaching this from a contract building perspective, it's ultimately going to be Super useful to know about this documentation as well on crates.io. I'm just going to go ahead and open that up for a second. And you can see the auto-generated documentation from docs.rs. So anything that is publicly exposed in our contract, well, maybe we'll just go all items. Anything that is publicly exposed for you to be able to use, you will have the auto-generated documentation, which will at least give you the information about the types of all of the fields within structs and all of the message types and message parameters and all that stuff, as well as very basic information about some handler functions and utility functions for reading stuff. But I think one thing that is probably useful is just to look at the structure of a domain name record. So we store when it was created, when it was expired, and where it resolves to. So this is, imagine we have a domain name, for example, well, we can go and we'll look at ArchID for a second. You see I'm logged in already. If I go and I look at my domains, we'll go to the one that I use the most frequently, which is my Discord name. So when we have this ArchID, richgirlonlsd.arch, this record is owned by this Cosmos address, but just because it's owned by this Archway address, it doesn't mean that it necessarily points to there when you resolve it. The resolver field that we were, didn't want to do that. It in this case, it does resolve to the same address, which is owning this particular NFT. But when we go back into the documentation here, so the name record is stored in contract state under a key, and that key is richgirlonlsd. And when the contract goes to resolve that state, it pulls up this record. The record will have these fields in it, and we'll go deeper into that in a second. It will have those fields in it, and where it resolves to is exactly that information that I was showing you here. So this field, the owner, is the owner of the NFT, which represents what this record is in storage of the registry contract. So important to remember that there are these two contracts. There is the NFT contract and there is the registry contract. Just go back to my slide for a second. Yeah, here we go. Start up a slideshow here. So we're done now with the introduction. Just move a little bit forward. And just some information about the criteria and the prizes. Well, actually, I'll just jump out for a second. And just, I know the host mentioned that there are these two tracks, and we spoke at the beginning of the workshop that we're specifically dealing with the Web3 DNS track today. That's what we're talking about. We got the rewards total of $3,000, 1,500 USDC for first, 1,000 USDC for second, and 500 USDC for the third place. But when we are speaking about this track, specifically Web3 DNS, we are talking about projects that are going to build some management functionality for ArchIDs. Basically, we're looking for some sort of integration with the ArchID registry in some way. We were talking on Tuesday about the other track, which is Web3 identity. We are looking for people to implement some functionality or some user display of profile information in the NFT contract. So one way to think about the difference between the two bounties, which is probably useful for you, is that the identity track is using the NFT contract, and the DNS track is using the registry contract. Here it is. Yes, implements the registry in some way. Just going back over to my slides for a second. Oh, yeah. So that is kind of like the difference between the two tracks. However, doesn't stop there. Multi-category, multi-bounty submissions are all good. There's nothing stopping you from implementing profile information stored in the NFTs in a project, which is building some management functionality or utility service that has to do with the registry contract. Yeah, you can apply to both tracks. And in fact, we absolutely encourage it. There is no reason why you couldn't win prizes from both tracks. So what you see here, if you're here for learning about Web3 DNS track today, and you're like, oh, the best amount of money that I could win is 1,500 USDC. Well, that's not actually the case, because you could also win a prize from both tracks. So that's super cool, and we're super happy to give you the opportunity to do that. Just a small note about the judging. What we're really looking for is some novel or meaningful use of your integration with the registry smart contract. If it's useful, if we think it's cool, we will look kindly upon your project submission. Of course, the other thing that I think most judges here for all the different tracks at the hackathon are interested in is we're looking for like a bit of completeness and polish. Obviously, the more polished your submission is, the higher your chances will become. And also, the easier it is for us as judges to actually critique and figure out what's going on with it. Obviously, if you produce a web front end, it's more annoying for us if you don't host it. That would be a lack of polish, I would say. If we need to spin up a server, or if we need to do to start the project up with a localhost server or something like that, just to check your code, that obviously is less time that we can devote to actually judging the code and the coolness of your project. We don't want to mess around with those things. So if you are building a front end, I do recommend that you host it somewhere. And if you're going from a smart contract perspective, as you probably saw in the criteria on the DoraHacks page, you must implement either a Web3 front end or a smart contract or both. So if you are just submitting a smart contract, once again, I would ask you that you just make our job a little easy for us by providing some polish. And in the smart contract context, what I mean is good unit test coverage. Because what that means is if I am reviewing your smart contract source code and I'm able to just run your unit tests, and I'm able to quickly look at your unit tests and I see that you have good coverage, that means I don't need to dive as deeply into the code of every single entry point and sort of wrap my head around what's going on there. I also don't need to deploy it to a blockchain, for example, like Archway testnet, just to check that it's actually doing what it claims to do. And then another aspect of that polish that I would recommend doing is you should probably do that work for us. If you're making a smart contract, you should put it on testnet and put the address for it in your README. That will enable me to just make transactions to it much easier because I won't have to deploy anything myself. So I guess the too long didn't read TLDR here is that the more you make our job easier in terms of polishing it up, writing your unit tests, hosting your code online on a web server, that means the less fiddling around we have to do when we're judging your submission, which means the more time we can actually spend on assessing how cool and useful the project is, rather than just trying to mess around, trying to get it set up so we can actually review what's going on there. Now, moving along here, getting now real into the nitty gritty, talking about name service routing. So you can see on the right here, we have an example of how you could do that. So name service routing, why is it useful? So the main utility here is that it gives it gives your users the opportunity to send funds to a human readable address like richgirlonlsd.arch without needing to know a longer Archway network address. So this is already supported in Leap and Cosmos Station. And the way that it works is if it's an invalid domain, you'll get an error response. If it's expired, that is also a case of invalid domain. So when I say invalid domain, I mean a domain which does not exist or is expired. If it's a valid domain, it will respond with the Archway address that name resolves to and an expiration date in seconds. So that is a Unix timestamp in seconds. Now I'll just do a quick little demo for everyone here. Let me see. So we are supported currently at the wallet level in Leap and Cosmos Station. Let's see if I can get my password right on first try. My fingers are crossed. I'm typing with crossed fingers. No, I'm actually not. If I could do that, it'd be awesome. Oh, that's amazing. First try. Beautiful. Okay. So my Leap is currently on Archway network, as you see here. If I go try to send someone some money, if I wanted to send to richgirlonlsd.arch, I can type that in. You can see it's trying to figure out the resolution. It's made that RPC request, and it's absolutely found out who I am. However, that happens to be the same address that I'm logged in with right now, so it wouldn't make much sense to send money to myself. But that's just proof of concept that feature is working. And it will be a very similar experience for Cosmos Station. However, it is a bit of a drag that we are not supported in Kepler. We have some ideas about what to do there, and we will get to that in this workshop shortly. Before we do that, I'm just going to give you a concrete example of running this sort of a command, which we're seeing on the right here. So this would be the equivalent command. As we're seeing here, I just sort of formatted it a little nicer so it would be easier to read in the slide. But this is the actual command all on one line. And when we submit that to the RPC, we get the expected response. Remember, it responds with an address and an expiration in seconds. We got our address, which is me, and we have our expiration. Of course, it's a Unix timestamp, so who knows what that means. But have a node terminal here. And I'm just going to go ahead and convert that to more of a human readable date. So this was the expiry that it said. Let's just cache that state to a variable for a second and then create a JavaScript date time. If we do that, we can tell that the richgirlonlsd.arch domain will expire July 23rd of 2026 at 1 a.m., 48 minutes, and 32 seconds UTC. Okay, just flip back to our slideshow and move along. So now we get to the fun stuff. Like, what can you build for this track? Well, some ideas that I came up with that would be cool is, Archway V7 upgrade just went online this week, and it offers some new and exciting modules. One of those modules is the CW callbacks module. This allows you to have, I would say, if anyone has worked in Web 2 and knows what a cron job is, it's like a scheduler that allows you to perform some sort of computational logic at a future date. So that's what the CW callbacks module does. It allows you to schedule a Archway transaction to be conducted at a later date. You will pay the gas up front, but the execution of the transaction will be held off or delayed until the time of your choosing. So if you feel confident in implementing that module, then you would be able to use that module to auto-renew people's domains. So we were just looking at the expiry date for richgirl and lsd.arch domain. We saw that it would expire in 2026 in July. So with a subscription auto-renewal service, we could pay the gas up front now and have that domain auto-renew at the date that it will expire. So operating a service like that would be really helpful for us. And we think that that would be a really cool project idea. Another issue that we have, some of you that were here on Tuesday might remember, I was speaking about the Network Wars game. This is netwars.archid.app. I go ahead and connect. You can see that I own a lot of ArchIDs. And there's no way currently to select one of them as my default. And when you ask for a list of someone's ArchIDs, the information is returned to you in alphabetical order. So projects like this one, like Network Wars, if we just go back to like a previous round, for example, like round 1 was really popular. Oh, this is not a good time to have issue in the contract. Well, contracts being a bit slow. Anyways, yeah. So what we're seeing here is when we're displaying the ArchIDs of other players, this is not the ArchID that necessarily they want to play under, right? For example, I like to play under richgirl on lsd.arch. However, my alphabetically first name is this numerical one. So that's what others would see when I make a transaction, because the history view that we're seeing here, because there's no way to select an ArchID as your default avatar and profile, softwares that use that for logins and user profile information, they're kind of forced to have some logic of selecting one of them from the bunch when they're talking about someone else. So I think the normal kind of way that people are going to go about it for right now is just going to do the same thing that Network Wars is doing, which is just choosing the first one from the list. So that's why when we see a list of people that are playing the game in this round, it tends to be a lot of A's or ArchIDs which are starting with a letter that is close to the beginning of the alphabet. So this is suboptimal behavior. So we're super interested in someone creating some sort of solution that can, I in my head, I imagine it as like an additional contract that would become part of the ArchID suite of contracts. It'd be like an additional contract where you can declare your default avatar and profile just by selecting a default ArchID. It'd be a very simple contract to make, but there are lots of other ways that you can add cool aspects to it. And I'll leave that for you to dive into. I would say if you choose this one, it's got a scale. That's going to be something that I'm going to be looking at. And it also needs to respect the expiration timeline. So for example, if I select richgirl on LSD as my default ArchID, it has to no longer be my default ArchID when that domain expires. Of course, and then here is where things start to get interesting, right? So if I extend the timeline of my domain, if I go, for example, I'm in ArchID and I want to extend. So maybe I want to add a year onto the lifetime, if that's possible. I mean, it already expires 2 years from now. So yeah, there's not too much I can extend it. Unfortunately, this web UI needs to be fixed up a little bit because 3 years and 2 years are actually not a possibility. And actually the possibility right now is because we're not even in July. We can only extend the lifetime of this domain up until July 22nd of 2027, I believe. Because the registry contract enforces a maximum domain lifetime of 3 years. So yeah, I think that is kind of one significantly interesting and complicated piece about the idea of selecting a default ArchID is it's very easy to make this sort of a contract, right? We just need to store which one is their default, and we need to retire it when it goes out of scope because of expiry. However, what happens if they extend their domain? Your contract should be able to know that too. And there are a few ways I can think of about how that would be able to be done within a CosmWasm smart contract. But that's a puzzle piece I will leave for you to figure out. But suffice to say that I've assessed the feasibility of it. It's totally possible. Another cool idea I have, which I have not necessarily done all the legwork and research on for assessing the feasibility, but it's a cool idea I have, and I do believe it is possible, is coming up with some kind of a structure for being able to use our ArchIDs on other Cosmos chains that are CosmWasm enabled, or even if they're not CosmWasm enabled, if you can use interchain queries. So that would be a really cool project. It's a little fuzzier in my mind about like how it would all work, but that's like another like great idea that I'd like to pitch to you. So those are more like ArchID management things. In sort of like utility services that I think that would be cool would be having a browser extension that can navigate to people's ArchIDs. So if we go back to ArchID for a second, and not this domain, well, because it only has one website attached to it, which is actually just like my Telegram. So that's going to open Telegram. So it's not a good one to look at. But if I go to just like my name, you can see I have drewstaylor.com as a domain name I own. If we click it, you see here's my website. It's not very exciting. Sorry to disappoint. But there are people that do have exciting websites attached to their profiles. And it would be really cool if I could take this domain name, which is drewtaylor.arch, and .arch is not a valid Web 2 domain suffix. So have no conflicts here. It would be totally possible to build a browser extension for Google Chrome or a plugin for Firefox that would enable you to type, that's not what I wanted to do, to type drewtaylor.arch in your URL navigation bar, enter it. Well, this is just going to make a Google search because it's not valid. Is that right? Yeah, it just because it's not a valid domain. So you would have to find some way to intercept that behavior, which is coming from Google. But people have been doing this kind of thing in IPFS for years, and it would just be like super cool to have the ability to just like navigate to. Just open it up again, drewstaylor.arch. It would be just really cool to navigate to drewstaylor.arch in your browser URL navigation bar and have it just redirect you to this page. That'd be so cool. If you're looking at like a place to get started on that, as I said, people have been doing these kind of browser extensions for IPFS. I'm talking about the Interplanetary File System. They've been doing that kind of stuff for years. I've seen many of these extensions, and I've seen a similar browser extension for Ethereum ENS, which is the canonical name service system in Ethereum. So this is definitely possible. There are generally some tricks that you need to do. If you want more information about that, like how to hack your etc host file, or if you don't even know what a host file is in etc, feel free to reach out to me, and I will get into more of the details about all of the quirks about running a browser extension. Once again, this is another feature that I've spec'd out for a long time and have been wanting to build, but just haven't had the time to do so. And then finally, we get back to our discussion of Kepler. Oh, so we have Leap Wallet and we have Cosmos Station Wallet. They both support name service routing to ArchIDs. You can send money to richgirlandlsd.arch. You cannot do this in Kepler, but a lot of people use Kepler, and one of the support requests we get all the time is like, why can't I send money to people? Why can't I send money to people? Why doesn't ArchID actually work for what it's supposed to work for? So I think not a month goes by that I don't get this kind of user coming into our Discord server, and I'm like, let me guess, you're using Kepler? And they're like, yes, we are. And I'm like, yeah. It's actually just a Kepler issue. They don't want to support us. They support ICNS domain service protocol, which is, I think it's on osmosis. And they just don't want to include ArchID. So I would like to sort of like bridge the gap and help those people out. There are a lot of those users. There are a lot of support requests that we're getting all the time. I would like to see someone build something like a PayPal.me or a Venmo for Archway. And this would be like a payments app. I mean, I think like the rudimentary functionality that would be required here would be like, you go to a website, you enter someone's ArchID, and then you can just send them money. That would be like sort of like the base level of functionality that I would like to see. Although it doesn't end there, because I think a really, really awesome feature to have would be the same kind of features that you have from PayPal.me and Venmo, which is you can like request money from someone, and then it would send them a notification in some way. And then when they receive that notification, they can decide whether or not they should pay you. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to send them a notification because not all ArchIDs have the pertinent information that you'll need, right? You can see that this one doesn't have an email address attached to it. It has Twitter, but like, I mean, I guess you could make a tweet to them. I'm requesting this money. But yeah, the messaging part is hard, maybe. But like, I think it's like super desirable and would be like a big win. But it could also just could be something like a URL with a UID. You could send them that URL and it would be a request for payment to that user. And your DApp could have that user log in. And if the logged in user's Archway address matches the name service resolution of the ArchID that the request is made for, then that person should be able to use that shared URL, which is a request for payment, to actually complete that payment. So this could be like really useful in terms of like doing things like B2B and like business to business and business to customer invoicing. I see like a lot of amazing things that a service like PayPal.me/Venmo could provide for the Archway network. And to be honest, like I think of like all of the ones on the board here that we're seeing, both on the left pane and the right pane. I really do think that this last one that we're talking about, a PayPal.me or a Venmo style DApp, is probably the easiest to build. And it's probably like a super huge win. Just because there are just so many Kepler users. So if someone builds this and does a decent job at it, yeah, definitely going to have a good shot at winning some loot. And then, all you would need to do as well is include their profile information, their user avatar or something. And then you would also be able to qualify for a multi-category, multi-bounty submission for the chance to unlock even more funds as your prize. So yeah, that is pretty much the lay of the land with this workshop. If you need to reach out to us for help, I'm always around on Discord. Now I am in the Archway HQ Discord. Please come to our own Discord server, as that's like the best place to reach out to us for support. A lot of people make support requests to ArchID in the Archway HQ Discord. And I think for the mods in that server, it's like a bit annoying. It's like, it doesn't just happen with ArchID, it happens with Astrovault too. I think those are like the two main dApps that seem to be having people being like, in Archway HQ Discord, which is the Discord for Archway Network. Those are like the two dApps that are getting like support requests within the blockchains Discord. Yeah, both Astrovault and ArchID, we both have our own Discords, and definitely reach out to us for help there. Of course, you can reach out to us on Twitter as well. If you're not a Discord user, we definitely prefer Discord. We will grit our teeth and deal with you and help you out and support you as much as we can on Twitter as well. But yeah, we prefer Discord, just a heads up there. Then the other thing to note is like starting next week, we have Q&A time. This will be like a weekly office hour. So I'm going to be at the office hour every week. It happens the same hour as this presentation, but I believe it happens on Tuesdays, not Thursdays. So yeah, every week during the hackathon, I'm going to be there. And if you have questions, I'll be able to, do pair programming, just help you out as much as possible directly in session. So that's a good way to reach us. And if it doesn't work for your time zone, that's not a deal breaker. You can still get to us on Discord. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Yeah, I can see a question on the live chat. If the resolved address changes, then I might be sending tokens to someone else. Are there events created that my dApps can listen to to notify my users that the address linked to an ArchID has changed?
So that is a pretty interesting question. There's like a few ways to approach this, right? So the most important thing is that we need to think about the architecture of blockchains and the way that nodes work, right? So maybe someone is changing where their address resolves to, and your node doesn't have that yet. But we have a block time average for block time confirmations of 6 seconds on Archway network. And then the propagation of those nodes is like fractions of a second. So we're dealing with like a matter of milliseconds. When you make a query to the registry contract to get where that name resolves to, that is where it resolves to. Your dApp shouldn't cache that information, right? Of course, there are events There are events in every entry point. So when you look at that particular entry point, there will be the action name. That will be the event that you can listen to. Because you'll get in the event, you'll get the I think the user's address, like the sender, and you will get the entry point. However, like this is pretty much like a non-issue because we're dealing with like milliseconds. What we're dealing with is like differences between nodes, right? So when you query the registry for where that address is resolving to, that is the current information, right? So like what are the use cases here, right? So maybe they like maybe you're building a payments app, right? And it fetched where the address resolves to. And they sort of like stayed on the page for like 5 minutes before actually like pushing through the transaction by like putting like this press on the send button. Your dApp should fetch the information again right before broadcasting the TX through the wallet extension, right? Because they might be staying on the page for a while. Yeah, you just before broadcasting your transaction, you should just fetch it again just to make sure that the information hasn't changed. However, in terms of like providing like real time, like the query itself is already real time. The margin for error here would be like milliseconds, and those millisecond differences would just be the differences between nodes.
Drew, just another thing. If you can also, I know we've also sent the presentation link for everyone to recap on the chat. And the workshop, the recording of the workshop would also be up on the workshops tab on the hackathon page. But just if you can also send the Discord, ArchID Discord link to the private chat, and we can put it up in the live chat.
Yeah. Hold on a sec. On ArchID .app, it's at the bottom of the page, but I will also send it here in the chat. It's this one.
Perfect.
Oh yeah, and the presentation as well. I mean, there's a bunch of links there, so I shared those slides, and the Discord's in there too. So yeah, definitely like a good place to get all the links.
Perfect. Yeah, so now the hackers know their place to go and ask questions and discuss more things, just in case if they miss this workshop or have any other questions down the line. We do have another questions which says, are subdomains possible?
Yes. As far as I know, we're the only Web3 DNS service that has subdomains. And subdomains are pretty interesting. A lot of people, I definitely, this is kind of like a large discussion, like what are subdomains? But I think I've tried to address most of those questions in the docs website. So definitely read the kind of like overview, which is like the first page in the docs website. So what I'm speaking about is docs.archid.app. I'll type it in here. docs.archid.app. So subdomains are super useful, for example, for developers or people that own different types of accounts like multi-signature accounts. So they're a good way to signify that you are an owner of Archway address, which is like not your main address, which is owning these ArchIDs. And then another thing that's cool with subdomains is you can be the owner of a top level domain and send the subdomain to somebody else, which means that they are actually able to configure the metadata for that subdomain. They can do like do things like change where that I don't think, sorry, they can't, only the top level domain owner can change where a subdomain resolves to. However, the subdomain owner would be able to do things like update the description, update the avatar and like profile information. So for example, like an organization might want to use, maybe they have many contracts, maybe they have many websites. They could have the subdomains owned by people responsible for those websites that aren't like responsible for owning the entire org, which might want to keep the subdomains under their control in terms of like the name service resolution, but might want the sort of like finer details about like what's going on in the profile and stuff to be managed by like maybe like the owner of that website. So yeah, there's a lot of different uses for subdomains. It takes a little bit of time to kind of wrap your head around, but like they're pretty cool. And I invite you to go to the ArchID docs website to learn a little more about that.
Thanks a lot for your time, Drew. There are all the relevant links are in the chat, so feel free to pick it up from there. And yeah, I wish everyone building in this hackathon a very good luck. Thank you, Drew, for all the answers and your time today. Anything else that you might want to touch on, or any parting words from the developers?
Yeah, nothing much to say, but just thanks everyone for coming out or checking back on the video later if you're watching the recording. And I'm very, very excited to see what everyone will build. So yeah, I await.
Yeah. Good luck everyone. And
good luck, everyone.
That's today.